When my parents boarded their long-awaited first-class flight to celebrate their 30th anniversary, they were excited for peace, comfort, and a little luxury after years of hard work. But that peace didn't last long. Minutes after sitting down, too loud, overconfident women appeared, the kind of people who think the world revolves around them. These were the infamous Karen sisters, and from the moment they entered, the air turned tense. They looked at my parents' seats like they were stolen treasures. "Excuse me, we booked these seats." One snapped, her sunglasses still on indoors. My mom, always calm, replied with a polite smile, "I'm sorry, but these are ours. You might want to check your tickets." That's when the real drama began. They refused to believe it. They called the flight attendant, shouted about elderly privilege, and even accused my parents of lying. Everyone in first class stared, my dad quietly shaking his head, while my mom's patience started wearing thin. When the flight attendant confirmed my parents' tickets were genuine, the sisters still wouldn't stop. They stood in the aisle refusing to move until someone did the right thing. My mom, usually the sweetest woman on earth, finally decided enough was enough. What she did next not only silenced those rude sisters but also made the entire cabin clap in disbelief. No one expected an elderly couple to deliver such a perfect act of revenge in broad daylight, calm, clever, and absolutely unforgettable. It wasn't loud or cruel. It was pure poetic justice. By the time the plane landed, those Karen sisters wished they had never opened their mouths. The bright morning sun spilled across the airport windows, turning the tiled floor into a mirror of golden glass. My parents, David and Margaret Parker, walked hand in hand through the bustling terminal, both smiling in that calm, contented way that only comes after years of shared struggles and quiet victories. This trip was special, not just another vacation, but their long-awaited 30th wedding anniversary getaway. After raising 3 kids, paying off the house, and surviving life's storms together, they had finally decided to treat themselves. They had planned it for months: the flight to Hawaii, the resort near the beach, the morning coffee they'd sip while watching waves crash. For once, everything seemed perfect. The first-class tickets were the cherry on top, a small luxury they'd earned after decades of sacrifice. My mom had packed her best summer dresses, and my dad even bought a new hat, something he rarely did, as they checked in. The airport buzzed with life. Announcements echoed from speakers, luggage wheels rattled, and the smell of coffee drifted from nearby cafes. My dad handed over their passports with a grin. "Anniversary trip," he told the airline agent proudly. The young woman smiled warmly and handed them their boarding passes. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Parker. You're all set for first class." They thanked her and walked toward security, laughing about how their first flight together, 30 years ago, had been on a small, noisy plane that barely had working air conditioning. This, they thought, was going to be very different. Once through the gate, they found 2 cozy seats near a big window. Planes rolled lazily across the tarmac, reflecting sunlight off their wings. Everything felt peaceful until 2 loud voices broke through the air like thunder. "Can you believe this?" They said. "No upgrades left." "That's ridiculous," one woman exclaimed. Her voice carried halfway across the lounge. My parents turned slightly, curious but not wanting to stare. The source of the noise was impossible to miss. 2 women in their late 40s, dressed in bright, mismatched designer clothes that screamed attention, were pacing in front of the counter. Their bleached hair was piled high in messy buns, and oversized sunglasses covered half their faces, despite being indoors. "They look like trouble," my dad whispered with a chuckle. My mom smiled politely. "Let's just hope they're not on our flight." But fate, of course, had other plans. When boarding time arrived, my parents joined the line for first class. The 2 women were still at the counter, arguing about loyalty points and customer respect. The gate agent finally gestured for them to move aside so others could board. My parents walked past quietly, unaware that these 2 women would soon turn their peaceful flight into a storm. Inside the aircraft, the first-class cabin was bright and inviting. Sunlight filtered through the windows, illuminating cream-colored seats and polished wood accents. My mom settled into her window seat, sighing with delight as she reclined a little. "This feels like heaven," she said softly. My dad smiled, adjusting his watch. "You deserve it, Maggie." The attendants moved gracefully up and down the aisle, greeting passengers with practiced smiles. The gentle hum of conversation filled the cabin. Everything was perfect until the voices returned. "Excuse me," one of the women barked from the aisle. "These are our seats." My dad looked up, confused. Standing in front of them were the same 2 women from the gate, the ones who had been causing a scene earlier. The taller one, with sharp red lipstick and a leopard print scarf, pointed dramatically at my parents' seats. 1A and 1B. "That's what's on our tickets." My dad blinked. "Are you sure?" "These are ours." He held up his boarding pass, showing 1A and 1B printed clearly in bold letters. The woman snorted. "Please, do you even know how the upgrade system works? I bet they gave you the wrong seats." Her sister, slightly shorter but equally loud, crossed her arms. "We've been loyal customers for years. We always get first class." The flight attendant, a young woman named Erin, approached with her usual calm smile. Is everything all right here? These people are in our seats, the taller sister said, jabbing a finger toward my parents. We paid for first class. Erin took both their tickets and scanned them carefully. A few moments later she looked up, maintaining her professional tone. Ma'am, these seats belong to Mr. and Mrs. Parker. Your tickets are 4 to 4A and 2 for B in economy class. The women stared at her in disbelief. That's impossible, the shorter one said. We booked first class weeks ago. Erin shook her head politely. I'm sorry, but our records show economy. If there was an issue with your upgrade, you'll have to discuss it with customer service after the flight. The taller woman scoffed loudly, rolling her eyes. Oh sure, blame the customer, typical. She turned toward my mom and added, you don't look like first-class passengers anyway. My dad's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, my mom simply smiled. Well, looks can be deceiving. The flight attendant repeated her request for the women to move. The other passengers were now watching closely, pretending to read magazines while clearly eavesdropping. After a long moment, the sisters huffed and stormed toward the back of the plane, muttering insults as they went. Peace returned, but only for a moment. Just as the doors were closing, the sisters started complaining again, this time to a different flight attendant. This is unacceptable, one of them snapped. We can't sit back there. It smells like peanuts. Meanwhile, in first class, my parents tried to relax. My mom sipped her orange juice while my dad opened a newspaper. You'd think some people never learned manners, he murmured. My mom laughed softly. Oh, I learned something a long time ago. Never argue with fools. They'll drag you down to their level. For the next few minutes, everything seemed normal again. The engine started humming, the sunlight danced across the runway, and the plane began to taxi. But just before takeoff, my mom noticed movement behind her. She turned slightly and caught sight of the sisters, leaning forward from the economy section, glaring daggers at her. They're still angry, she whispered. My dad smiled wryly. Let them be. We'll be in Hawaii soon. But even as he said it, there was a flicker of tension in the air, that uneasy feeling that this wasn't the end. My mom sensed it too. The sisters had been embarrassed publicly, and people like that rarely let things go quietly as the plane lifted into the bright blue sky. My mom looked out the window, trying to focus on the clouds below. The sunlight shimmered like a sea of white cotton. She wanted to enjoy the peace, but something told her that peace wouldn't last for long. The Karen sisters weren't done yet, not by a long shot, and my mom, patient and gentle as she was, had no idea that before this flight ended she would be the one to deliver a lesson those two would never forget. The plane soared steadily into the clear blue sky, the morning sun glowing softly through the windows. The light shimmered over the ocean far below, and for a while, everything seemed calm again. The soft hum of the engines, the polite chatter of passengers, and the smell of brewed coffee filled the cabin. My parents finally began to relax, thinking the earlier drama with the two loud women was over. But peace rarely lasts long when entitlement is involved. After the seatbelt sign turned off, the flight attendants began serving drinks. A gentle, smiling attendant named Erin returned to my parents' row with a tray of refreshments. Champagne to celebrate your anniversary, she offered kindly. My mom's face lit up with surprise. Oh, how lovely. Yes, please. My dad grinned, raising his glass toward her. To 30 years, he said softly. They clinked glasses as sunlight reflected through the champagne, sparkling like gold. For a moment, everything was perfect until the unmistakable voices of the Karen sisters drifted from behind, the curtain separating economy from first class. Unbelievable. One of them hissed, they're giving champagne up there, and we're stuck with juice boxes. Probably because they bribed someone, the other muttered bitterly. Look at them pretending to be fancy. Those seats should have been ours. My mom heard every word but didn't turn around. Instead, she took a slow sip of her drink and whispered to my dad, ignore them. They're trying to get a reaction. He nodded, but his patience was already wearing thin. About 20 minutes later, as lunch service began, the curtain rustled, and there they were again. The taller Karen peeked through, holding her phone like she was investigating a crime scene. Excuse me, she called out, stepping boldly into first class. Can someone explain why those two people got free champagne and we didn't? The other passengers turned their heads, clearly uncomfortable. Erin quickly approached, maintaining her professional tone. Ma'am, first-class service is for first-class passengers only. Please return to your seat. But we were supposed to be first class, the woman argued. The system messed up. You can't just treat us like economy peasants. Erin sighed quietly. Please, for safety reasons, you need to return to your seats. The woman's sister had followed her in now, her oversized purse swinging as she pointed toward my parents. They don't even look like they belong here. You should switch us, it's only fair. My dad put down his fork and looked up calmly. Ladies, he said, his voice firm but polite. You've already made your point. Now please, go back and let everyone enjoy their flight. The taller sister smirked. Oh, defending yourself, huh? Figures. My mom set her glass down and met the woman's gaze with the kind of calm that only comes from a lifetime of patience. You might want to sit down before you embarrass yourself again, she said evenly. That line hit its mark. A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the cabin. Even the businessman across the aisle hid a smile behind his newspaper. The taller sister's face flushed red. "How dare you talk to me like that?" she hissed, but Erin had already stepped between them. "Ma'am," the flight attendant said firmly this time, "I'm warning you. If you refuse to follow instructions again, I'll have to inform the captain." The sisters glared but finally turned around, muttering curses as they disappeared back through the curtain. The quiet returned, awkward, fragile, but real. My parents looked at each other and exhaled. For a while, everything settled again. Lunch was served, laughter returned, and the passengers eased back into comfort. My mom enjoyed her salad while my dad watched a movie. But behind that curtain, the Karen sisters were stewing in bitterness. Every few minutes, they whispered loudly about unfair treatment and special people who think they're better than everyone else. After about an hour, a small commotion stirred in the aisle behind them. Erin was dealing with another request from the sisters this time. They were demanding that their economy meals be replaced with the same dishes being served in first class. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Erin repeated patiently, "but that's not allowed." "Ridiculous," one of them snapped. "You're discriminating against us." Several passengers rolled their eyes. My mom glanced back briefly and then looked out the window at the vast blue ocean below. She took a deep breath, trying to focus on the calm waves instead of the chaos behind her. But the sisters weren't finished. About an hour before landing, my mom noticed movement again. The curtain swayed, and one of the sisters, the shorter one this time, crept through the gap, glancing around like a spy on a mission. She darted toward the galley, where snacks and beverages were neatly stacked for first-class passengers. At first, my mom didn't react. But then she saw the woman actually grab a handful of small packaged treats, chocolates, cookies, and nuts, and stuff them into her purse. She even opened a soda and began sipping it right there, as if she owned the place. My mom blinked in disbelief. A few nearby passengers noticed too, whispering among themselves. Erin was busy helping another traveler at the opposite end of the cabin, unaware of the sneaky theft happening right behind her. My dad looked at my mom and whispered, "You're not going to say anything, are you?" She smiled faintly. "Oh, I'll say something, but not yet." When Erin returned a few minutes later, my mom leaned slightly toward her. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I think someone from economy might have wandered up here again. She's helping herself to the snacks." Erin blinked in surprise and turned. Sure enough, there stood the shorter sister, holding a chocolate bar and pretending to examine the ingredients like she was about to buy it from a store. "Ma'am," Erin said sharply, "those items are for first-class passengers only. Please return to your seat immediately." The woman froze, then stammered, I was just checking something." The taller sister appeared again, pretending to defend her sibling. "She was just looking. You don't have to attack her." Erin's patience finally broke. "Both of you, back to your seats. Now if you refuse, the captain will be notified, and security will meet you upon landing." A stunned silence filled the cabin. The sisters exchanged horrified looks. This wasn't how they expected things to go. They mumbled excuses and shuffled back toward the economy section, red-faced and humiliated. As they disappeared behind the curtain for the final time, the tension melted. A few passengers chuckled quietly, and one even whispered, "About time." My dad turned to my mom, smiling. "You didn't have to do that, you know." "Oh, I did," she said calmly, taking another sip of her drink. "Some lessons need a little sunlight to grow." Outside the window, the Pacific stretched endlessly beneath the afternoon glow. The plane glided smoothly and the cabin settled into peace once again. But deep down, my mom knew this wasn't the end of it. People like the Karen sisters rarely admit defeat, and if she had learned anything in her 30 years of marriage, it was that sometimes patience wasn't just about staying calm. Sometimes, patience was about waiting for the perfect moment to strike back gracefully, cleverly, and in a way no one ever saw coming. And that moment was closer than anyone realized. The sun hung high over the endless blue horizon, spilling warm daylight through the airplane's windows. The flight was halfway to Hawaii now, cruising steadily at 30,000 feet. Most passengers were either dozing off or watching movies with headphones on, their trays cleared after lunch. The hum of the engines mixed with the occasional clink of glass from the galley, a sound that usually meant comfort, not conflict. But beneath that calm surface, tension still lingered like a shadow. My parents sat quietly in their seats, enjoying a light conversation about what they'd do once they landed, a walk along the beach, dinner under the stars. My mom smiled softly, her voice calm, but her eyes carried a sharpness that my dad recognized all too well. It was the same look she gave when someone pushed her patience 1 inch too far. "Are you still thinking about those women?" my dad asked, lowering his voice. "Thinking," she replied with a slight grin. "I'm observing." "Observing," he repeated, amused. "Yes," she said, glancing toward the curtain that separated first class from economy. "People like them always end up creating their own trouble. You just have to wait." He chuckled. "You sound like a detective." "I've been a teacher for 20 years, she said. "Trust me, I've seen every kind of troublemaker." Just then, the curtain rustled again. The familiar, unwelcome voices emerged from the other side. Excuse me, came the shrill tone of the taller Karen. "Is anyone working here? I've been pressing this call button forever." A flight attendant hurried over. "Yes, ma'am. What can I help you with?" Help, she scoffed. You can start by explaining why the couple in the front gets treated like royalty while we're ignored back here. It's discrimination, plain and simple. Her sister nodded fiercely. Exactly, we demand proper service and we want to speak to whoever's in charge. The attendant, clearly worn down by their attitude, kept her voice calm. Ma'am, everyone receives service according to their ticket class. Please, lower your voice, other passengers are trying to rest. The taller woman rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh, so now we're too loud. This airline is ridiculous. I've never been treated like this in my life. My mom sighed softly, shaking her head. They really don't quit, do they? Just ignore them, my dad said. They'll tire themselves out eventually. But they didn't. A few minutes later, the sisters began whispering again, their words dripping with bitterness. Those people up front are probably fake rich. One of them said loud enough for others to hear that they're using credit cards they can't afford to pay off. A passenger nearby shot them a look, but they didn't care. They went on and on, inventing stories about my parents, laughing cruelly finally. After one particularly loud comment about how some people don't deserve luxury, my mom calmly pressed her own call button. The flight attendant appeared quickly. Yes, Mrs. Parker. My mom smiled warmly. Would you please let the captain know that 2 passengers in economy are disturbing others? They've been moving back and forth, causing disruption, and now they're verbally harassing people. The attendant nodded firmly. Of course, ma'am. She disappeared behind the curtain, and within minutes, a new face appeared, a senior attendant named Marcus, tall, composed, and with the unmistakable confidence of authority. He approached the sisters' seats. Ladies, he said in a calm but commanding tone, I've received several complaints regarding your behavior. I'm afraid I have to ask you to remain seated for the rest of the flight. Any further disturbance may result in an incident report filed with the airline. The taller Karen's jaw dropped. Are you threatening us? No, ma'am, he replied smoothly. I'm informing you. The sisters went silent for the first time since takeoff. They huffed, crossed their arms, and sank into their seats, fuming but defeated. The curtain closed once more, sealing the piece like a drawn curtain on a stage play. My mom leaned back, crossing her legs, a faint smile tugging at her lips. My dad chuckled. You just got them grounded, didn't you? Grounded. She smirked. Let's call it a gentle reminder of boundaries. Hours passed, and the tension seemed to dissolve into the calm rhythm of the flight. The passengers in first class chatted quietly or read books. My mom dozed off briefly, dreaming of ocean waves and the scent of salt air. Everything seemed peaceful again. Until the final hour before landing, that's when the storm returned. It began with a sudden crash. The curtain flung open, and a flight attendant stumbled forward, followed by the shrill voices that everyone had learned to dread. This is unacceptable, the shorter Karen shouted, holding up a cup of spilled soda. She poured this on me on purpose. That's not true, ma'am, the young attendant said, flustered. The plane hit turbulence, and your drink tipped over. Liar. The taller one snapped. You're just covering for each other. The entire cabin turned toward the commotion. My dad groaned under his breath. My mom, on the other hand, sat perfectly still, watching the scene unfold. Marcus appeared again, his patience visibly thinner this time. What's going on now? She ruined my clothes. The shorter woman cried dramatically, and no one's doing anything about it. Marcus folded his arms. Ma'am, please lower your voice. You were already warned about causing disturbances. Oh, so you're taking her side too, she screeched. This airline is a joke. At that moment, my mom stood up. The entire row turned toward her. She walked gracefully to the curtain, her voice calm but cutting through the air like a blade. Enough, she said softly. The 2 women froze. My husband and I have listened to you insult the crew, argue with passengers, and throw tantrums for hours, she continued, her tone controlled and firm. You've disrespected everyone on this plane, including yourselves. Now sit down, stop shouting, and act your age. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The taller sister's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Her sister looked around, realizing every eye in first class was on them. Even the crew members had paused, watching. Who do you think you are? The taller one finally blurted. My mum smiled slightly. Someone who knows what class actually means. A soft wave of laughter rippled through the cabin. Even Marcus hid a grin as he stepped forward. Ladies, that's enough. Back to your seats now. The sisters turned bright red, glaring at everyone before stomping back through the curtain. When it fell shut behind them, the silence that followed felt like a reward. My mom quietly returned to her seat. My dad leaned toward her, eyes wide with admiration. You just silenced hurricanes, he whispered. She shrugged lightly, picking up her book again. Sometimes storms need a little sunshine to clear them out. As the plane began its descent, the sky outside glowed with a soft golden hue. The clouds looked peaceful again, stretched across the horizon like cotton. My parents held hands, smiling, the chaos finally behind them. But little did they know, the sisters weren't finished scheming. The humiliation had stung deeply, and by the time the plane's wheels touched Hawaiian soil, they were already planning something, a final, desperate attempt to reclaim the attention they had just lost. And my mom, she was ready for it more than they could possibly imagine. The airplane began its slow descent toward Honolulu. Sunlight spilling through the windows and painting golden streaks across the cabin. The ocean below shimmered like glass. The distant islands glowed in the warmth of the afternoon, and a collective calm seemed to settle over the passengers. After nearly 6 hours in the air, everyone was ready to feel solid ground beneath their feet. My parents, David and Margaret Parker, sat quietly, hands intertwined. The earlier chaos from the Karen sisters had faded into a memory, at least for most of the passengers. My mum, however, had that sharp, knowing glint in her eyes again, the same one that meant she was still paying attention. My dad caught the look and chuckled softly. "Still thinking about them, aren't you?" he murmured. She smiled faintly. "Let's just say I've learned not to underestimate people who hate losing. They're quiet now, but quiet doesn't always mean calm." He nodded thoughtfully. "You're probably right, but we're almost there. Nothing else can happen now, right?" She raised an eyebrow. "Oh, don't say that. You'll jinx it." And indeed, moments later, the faint sound of loud whispers started filtering through the curtain again. Familiar voices, sharp and restless. The sisters were arguing with a flight attendant near the economy galley. Their words were muffled, but the tone was unmistakable. Frustration, bitterness, and just a hint of revenge brewing underneath. When the plane finally touched down and the seatbelt signs chimed off, the cabin erupted with the usual rush of movement, people standing too early, overhead bins opening, bags being pulled down. My parents stayed seated, as they always did, preferring to wait until the crowd thinned. That's when the Karen sisters made their move. They came striding up the aisle from economy, before the first-class passengers had even begun to stand. Their faces were red from the flight, their eyes filled with indignation. The taller one wore a smug smile that immediately put everyone on edge. "Oh, we're just coming up to grab our bags," she said loudly when Marcus, the senior attendant, stepped in front of them. "We're in a hurry." "I'm sorry, ma'am," Marcus said firmly. "Passengers must exit in order, by row. Please return to your seats until first class disembarks." "Oh, please," the shorter sister scoffed. "We've waited long enough in that cramped section. We deserve to get off early after what we went through." The other passengers began murmuring, some shaking their heads, others rolling their eyes. My parents remained silent, watching from their seats. My dad leaned over to my mum. "Should we say something?" She shook her head slightly. "Not yet." The sisters refused to back down. "You're discriminating against us again," the taller one snapped. "This whole flight has been unfair. We were going to report every single one of you." Marcus's patience was wearing thin. "Ma'am, please step aside. You are holding up the deplaning process." The taller woman glared at him and then suddenly turned her attention to my parents. "You," she hissed, pointing toward them. "You started this. You made the staff treat us like trash." The entire cabin went still. My mum blinked in disbelief. "Excuse me," she said calmly. "Don't play innocent." The shorter sister barked. "You tattled on us. You ruined our trip." My mum's face softened into a polite but icy smile. "You ruined your own trip the moment you decided to act like spoiled children." A few passengers stifled laughter. The taller Karen gasped. "How dare you talk to us like that? You think you're better than us because you're sitting in first class." My mom tilted her head. "No," she said simply, "because I know how to behave like an adult." The sisters opened their mouths to shout again, but Marcus stepped between them. His voice was firm now, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Enough, both of you remain here until instructed to leave. Everyone else, please continue to exit." My mom stood slowly, gathering her things with elegance that only made the sisters' fury burn hotter. "Come on, dear," she said to my dad, her tone calm as ever. "Let's not keep the nice people behind us waiting." As my parents stepped into the aisle, the two Karens exchanged glances, and then one of them muttered loudly, "Figures. Must be nice to buy your way through life." My mom stopped. The entire cabin froze again. She turned her head slightly, her eyes bright but her voice soft enough to make the moment sting. "Oh, I didn't buy my way through life," she said. "I worked for it. You should try it sometime." The applause that followed was immediate and genuine. Even the flight attendants couldn't hide their smiles. The sisters stood frozen, humiliated, as my parents walked calmly toward the exit, sunlight flooding through the open door. But the story didn't end there. When the passengers stepped into the jet bridge, the captain himself stood near the door, greeting everyone with a kind smile. "Thank you for flying with us today," he said to each traveler. When my parents approached, he paused. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker, I just wanted to personally apologize for the disturbance earlier. The crew informed me of your patience and kindness. Thank you for handling it so gracefully." My mom smiled warmly. "Thank you, Captain. Your team did wonderfully." Behind them, however, the Karen sisters were still complaining, their voices echoing down the jet bridge. "We're going to call customer service. We'll get you all fired." The captain exchanged a glance with Marcus, who subtly nodded. Then the captain said, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "Actually, ma'am, since there were multiple behavioral reports filed against you, security will be meeting you at the gate for a quick discussion before you proceed to baggage claim." The sisters' faces turned pale. "What security? We didn't do anything wrong." My mum, standing just ahead, whispered to my dad, "Now that's karma boarding on time." Sure enough, 2 airport security officers stood at the gate's end, waiting. They weren't aggressive, just professional, calm, and ready to de-escalate if necessary. The passengers exiting behind my parents gave the sisters plenty of room as the officers stepped forward. "Ladies," one officer said, "we just need to have a short conversation regarding complaints filed during your flight." "Complaints?" the taller one stammered. "About what?" "About you," Marcus said politely, handing over the paperwork he'd filled out mid-flight. The sisters looked around in disbelief as the remaining passengers streamed past, some smiling, others whispering. My parents paused just long enough to catch the scene, the 2 women red-faced and spluttering, being gently escorted aside as the rest of the crowd moved freely into the bright Hawaiian sunlight. Outside the terminal, the ocean breeze met my parents with soft warmth. My dad laughed quietly. "Do you think they'll ever learn?" My mom adjusted her sunglasses and smiled, her eyes glinting with satisfaction. "Maybe not," she said, "but at least the rest of the plane learned what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness." They walked hand in hand through the terminal, the chaos of the flight already fading behind them. Ahead lay turquoise water, white sand, and peace, the kind that can only come after standing up to nonsense with grace and confidence. For the first time that day, my mom finally exhaled fully, feeling the weight of the entire journey lift from her shoulders. "Now," she said with a small, content smile, "let's go celebrate 30 years of surviving life, and a few Karens too." The Hawaiian sunlight poured through the airport windows as my parents stepped outside, the warmth instantly wrapping around them like a soft embrace. The tension from the flight slowly melted away, replaced by the sound of ocean waves somewhere in the distance and the hum of palm trees swaying in the breeze. The air smelled of sea salt and plumeria flowers. It was paradise, exactly what they had dreamed of for months. But as my dad hailed a cab, my mom couldn't help glancing back through the glass doors. Inside, the 2 Karen sisters were still at the gate, arguing furiously with the security officers. Their voices carried faintly through the glass, high-pitched, defensive, and filled with excuses. One was waving her phone, demanding to speak to a manager. The other was clutching her purse like it contained evidence of injustice. My mom smiled faintly. "Justice delivered," she murmured. My dad chuckled. "You're enjoying this a little too much." She grinned. "Oh, not at all. I just appreciate when life teaches people lessons I don't have to." They climbed into a taxi, leaving the chaos behind. The car rolled through bright streets lined with coconut palms, past murals and cafes filled with laughter. My parents sat side by side, holding hands, their reflections glimmering in the window. For the first time in days, everything felt peaceful. Their hotel overlooked the ocean, white sand, turquoise waves, and a balcony view that looked like it belonged on a postcard. As they stepped into the cool marble lobby, a cheerful receptionist greeted them. "Welcome to the Pacific Pearl Resort. You must be the Parkers. Happy anniversary." My mom's eyes widened. "How did you know?" The receptionist smiled. "Your airline called ahead. They wanted to make sure your trip continues on a good note after an eventful flight." My parents exchanged amused glances, while my dad said, "That's certainly one way to describe it." The young woman laughed and handed them a keycard. "You've been upgraded to the honeymoon suite, no extra charge. And dinner tonight is on the house." My mom raised an eyebrow. "You're joking." "Not at all, ma'am. The captain personally called our manager to said you and your husband showed exceptional patience and grace." For a moment, my mom was speechless. Then she smiled, the calm, satisfied smile of someone who didn't need revenge to win, but somehow got it anyway. The suite was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows opened onto a private balcony overlooking the sea. The sunlight danced across the waves, painting the room in golden warmth. My mom walked to the edge, feeling the breeze in her hair. 30 years, she whispered softly, and still full of surprises. That evening they dressed for dinner, my dad in a crisp shirt, my mom in a floral sundress. The restaurant overlooked the ocean, where the sunset painted the sky in colors of fire and rose. They toasted to their years together, laughing over shared memories and the absurdity of their flight experience. But fate had one last twist. Halfway through dinner, a commotion stirred near the restaurant entrance. My mom turned and there they were again, the Karen sisters. They looked different now, disheveled, frustrated, dragging suitcases behind them. Apparently, the airline had delayed their luggage due to their behavior report, and they had arrived at the same hotel only because it was one of the few with last-minute rooms available. The taller one spotted my parents immediately. Her face twisted in disbelief. "You have got to be kidding me," she snapped. My dad sighed. "Here we go again." My mom stayed calm, taking another sip of her drink. "Let's see what lesson life has planned for them next." The sisters stomped over, ignoring the staff trying to guide them to the check-in counter. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" the shorter one hissed. "Because of you, security humiliated us. They took our names, said we're flagged for review." My mom placed her napkin gently on the table and looked up. "I didn't humiliate you. You did that all by yourselves." The taller sister leaned in. "You're lucky we're not the type to sue." "Oh, I think you're exactly that type," my mom replied sweetly. "But I also think you're too embarrassed to admit you were wrong." The sisters froze. Their faces turned red, but before they could respond, the restaurant manager appeared, flanked by a member of hotel security. "Ladies," he said firmly, "we ask that you not disturb our guests. If there's an issue, we can discuss it privately." The taller Karen pointed toward my parents. They started it. The manager blinked. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker, the couple who just received a courtesy upgrade from our corporate office." That was all it took. The sisters' expressions faltered. The manager's polite tone turned sharper. "If you continue to cause disruption, we'll have to ask you to leave the premises." A few nearby diners chuckled quietly. The Karen stammered, realizing they had lost yet another battle. The shorter one muttered something under her breath, and both women retreated toward the lobby, defeated once again. My dad shook his head, grinning. "You've got some kind of magic, you know that." My mom smiled softly. "It's not magic, it's manners. They're just allergic to it." The rest of the evening unfolded perfectly. After dinner, they walked along the beach, barefoot in the sand, the waves whispering against the shore. The moon shimmered over the water, casting a silver glow across the horizon. For the first time since that chaotic morning, my mom finally felt at peace, not just because justice had been served, but because she had proven something to herself, that grace and composure will always rise above arrogance and noise. She looked at my dad and said quietly, "You know what the real revenge was?" He raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Living better than they ever could." Calmly, kindly, and without lowering myself to their level. He smiled, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "That's my Maggie, the quiet storm." They stood there for a long while, watching the waves roll in and out. The Karens, somewhere in the same hotel, were probably still fuming, but that no longer mattered. The Parkers had won, not through shouting, not through fighting, but through dignity. As they walked back toward the hotel, the stars shimmered overhead, and my mom whispered, almost to herself, "Sometimes the best revenge is simply living in peace, while others destroy themselves with anger." And with that, she took her husband's hand, their laughter fading softly into the Hawaiian night. The story of the flight and the unforgettable lesson that came with it would become one of their favorite tales to tell for years to come, not as a story of confrontation, but as proof that even in a world full of chaos, kindness can still win, and that grace, when tested, shines brightest in the daylight.